of our ducks in a row. All right, it says we are recording. I will go ahead and share my screen. A lot of things. Let me move it to this one. All right. All right, well, welcome everyone. Happy Tuesday. I will pull up we're toggling through lots of materials. We've had batches of materials and lots of things to review. I'll go ahead and get us started and through our preamble and reminding everyone that we're really excited about the opportunity to create a student-based funding formula in Tennessee. Conversations on this topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula is recommended and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. Public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in the new funding formula, while all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly. Documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant of the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the proposed new funding formula. All right, so we will move on with our agenda. We have a lot of things to review and discuss, and I'm looking forward to that. So I'll kick it over to you, Chairman.
Okay. So in attendance today, I have Janice, Corey, Kim, Lance, and myself at this point, and Stephanie.
All right.
So has everyone had an opportunity to review the materials in the folder? There's a lot in the folder. Janice and I talked this morning. Just reading public comments took a while. Also, the materials that Janice sent in our invitation with the steering committee meeting, which was about an hour and I think 28 minutes long. So I hope some of you took an opportunity to look over that. So we'll start today by discussing the draft formula that came out last week and discuss our thoughts on what's there, and then we will go and revisit or reflect on our recommendations that we made in our previous meeting, and then we will kind of take a little opportunity to see if there are things that we want to hone or if we like the order and the items that we have, and then we'll finish up by looking at some of those definitions and policies that come along with this draft proposal. Of course, there are no dollar amounts on this draft proposal, and as was stated by the commissioner, money won't be discussed until after the State of the State address, which will happen on the last day of the month by the governor. So I will open the floor to you guys if you want to just give ideas or if you want to discuss feedback that you've received from folks in your community.
The most feedback I've gotten is keeping educator salaries as top priority to pay the teachers who've taught through this pandemic, have absorbed a lot of things that they didn't see coming, and also for retention, and also if we have a teacher shortage, it tells you something that we need to change something. I think the salaries for incoming teachers should be higher, make more competitive with other. It's really still not going to be when we talk about a $5,000 or $10,000 raise. In my county, we're talking about someone starting off at 41, where there are a lot of positions outside education where they could go make more money. But I think that's a good start. and to pay the teachers who have been in the grind and have, especially during a pandemic. We've got to value our teachers, and I think I believe in all the other things we've listed, but we've got to start with the ones who make it happen the most, and I think that's teachers, and paying them better. They have to start feeling valued, because they really, no matter our efforts at the local level and the school level, they still take home the same pay, whether we do things for them FARA or um, the culture we try to build at our schools, or even the local culture, but still they go home with the same pay. And I think that we've got to pay them better, much better, but I'm not sure how much is going to be accepted, but 10,000 would be a great start.
If may I ask a clarifying question? How did we derive at 5 to 10,000? Was that just something that we threw out just as a starting point? Okay.
Some of my feedback, especially from Sarah Andrews, is a board member in Sumner County in our district, and is very active. Not saying that others aren't, but I mean, you know who Sarah is if you're in this district. She's constantly promoting schools, advocating for teachers, students, highlighting even school events. She's very, very active, and she was proposing in a letter that I believe is in one of our first things back in December. She's proposing 10,000, and she and I talked, and she said, if you don't go for the home run, if you start at 5,000, they think that's your home run. And she said, Lance, that's really not even, but you got to start somewhere. So 10,000 is what she proposed and what I brought. I mean, I think teachers will be happy with 5, but if we start at 5 as our ballpark, our home run figure, then people and whoever's making these final decisions would think, well, they'll be happy with 1 or 2. And I think teachers are better teachers, honestly, in some of the harder to staff positions in which we have elite teachers and excellent teachers. Their raises should be even more, because I know that we're having trouble in our district with blast classes, CDC, and other things. I like what Sarah said. I was thinking 5 because I thought, that's 10,000's outrageous, but it's not. We're trying.
No,
I mean,
that's what I was wondering. I was wondering if we shouldn't do 10 to 15.
yeah.
I mean, because that's like, I'm very afraid that they will think of 5 as a big win. And then when you do look at our neighboring states, I'm not sure 5 is an adequate win. And so I just wondered how we derived at 5 to 10. But that's, I mean, obviously anything is better than nothing, but I just don't want them to think that 5 is,
Right.
is enough, because especially, I mean, if I'm looking at this correctly, when you're looking at neighboring states, and especially for the east side, when you're looking at Georgia compared to Tennessee, we're pretty comparable to Alabama. And I'm only looking at those 2 states because of the geography of where we are. And we lose a lot of our teachers to those 2 states. So I was just wondering if there was a reason why 5 was our minimum.
And I posed the question this morning: what would be the cost if you looked at 5 statewide? I know what that would cost in my building, and I can figure that for my county, but that would be an interesting number to know. What would 5 versus 10 look like as far as statewide, to see what the feasibility of that is on top of all the other asks that we have.
Sure.
But to go along with Lance, if you've read through the public comments, there are a lot of comments about teacher salary, because the expectations and requirements of teachers have gone up, and the pay has remained to be the same, and demands are higher, yet the salary has not met the demand. So I do think that's not only feasible on our end as principals and seeing that daily, but I think the community sees that too from the comments that are in the comment pool there.
So just in other conversation, we've noted that, kind of researching that just a smidge, about every $1,000 equates to $100 million in state funding. So that would just kind of think about it as a full state.
$500 million.
Wow.
And so for every 1,000, it equals 100 million statewide funding.
And that is a lot, but other states are figuring that out. So, you know, I feel like we could figure that out.
This is Senator Crow. I would just note that we do have a $2 or $3 billion surplus, and if we're going to do something like this, now is probably the time, at least to try.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Senator Crow.
Welcome,
And
Senator Crow.
that doesn't include the federal dollars for education. Of course, they're more of a one-time, you know, non-recurring. But yeah, we should shoot for, you know, what we would like to have, and then if we get it cut down a little bit, that's, you know, that's the way it is. But we do have the dollars this year, and I mean, who knows, you know, what's going to happen in the next few months or year. But at this point, they are there. So whatever we can get for teachers, I mean, they certainly deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
If I could add just for a second to what Lance brought up, and thank you for that commitment, Senator Crow. We appreciate that. But I do think what's been interesting in the feedback is there's a mix of comments that I've received about teacher pay regarding recruitment of teachers as opposed to rewarding teachers. And I heard Lance talking about rewarding our teachers who have stuck with it. And that's really where my focus has been, because really, you know, it's almost taboo to talk about recruiting teachers with money, because then it's almost like, well, why do we teach? Do we teach for the money? Well, heck no, none of us got into this for the money. There's no way. But I do think there's a discussion to be had for the advantage of raising that salary for recruiting talent as opposed to just rewarding them, even though my heart is looking at the teachers in my building who are, you know, teaching their hearts out every day. So I do think there could be some discussion on both sides if we needed to leverage that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Farrah, do you want us to be making some of those notes over on and update the recommendations?
Probably need to. I think those are some good points. I jotted those down. You know, I think about math teachers are hard to come by. So I go back and think on the recruiting end, if college kids have an aptitude for math, they can find lots of career paths that'll pay a lot more than teaching. So they take those math skills elsewhere. But again, I think there's been a lot of talk in the last few years about recruitment and retention, and reward is important for those that have been in the trenches and doing a good job under all the extra expectations without any help. And these, you know, 2% salary increases the last few years that equate to a one-time bonus don't hit that salary schedule in a lot of places. And you know, the public thinks that we've been getting raises that are sustained, and they're not. And that's important. I think we've done a pretty good job through these talks of getting some of the public to understand that that's how those raises the last few years have trickled down within counties. But I still think maybe that's not widely known, because when the governor says a 2% raise, and that was a $500 bonus, that's not a raise.
So I just added, does that look like what you're kind of speaking to?
Mm-hmm.
Adding, so I heard it, we had 5 to 10, and we're saying maybe thinking more along the 10 to 15 to see,
Okay.
and they can lessen for sure, but go ahead and say the expectation, trying to increase that, and then paying attention to its impact for recruitment and retention.
Might even throw reward in there, which was Corey's purpose.
Well, and just so I'm clear, this is for everyone, not for those who are just now entering the profession, right?
Right.
Okay, okay.
In the
I
base.
got nervous for a minute that it was just for starting salaries. Yes, okay.
No, if anything, if we have a 10 to 15,000 or even 5 to 10,000, I'm with Corey. I think that that 10,000 should be for current teachers. And if you want to build your capacity to recruit better, the $5,000 figure, which is still, I mean, we're still having, we still have, most of us don't have that much trouble with applicants, maybe quality applicants, but I think a $5,000 raise, not raise, because they're not even employees yet, but if you could help school systems with supplementing their beginning pay by 5,000 for college graduates, you can probably help. That will probably help the recruitment. But I'm with Corey. I'm more about the teachers who are already in the grind. And like you said, Farrell, I haven't had a true raise, and this is my 30th year. I haven't had a raise since 11 years. So I don't really get that step raise in Sumner County. We got a great director who's really, has a tremendous budget, and we've got some good raises in the last few years. But as far as step raise, I stop at 19. And I've always wondered, why would you do that? That's when you have to plug in and, the grind gets, and maybe motivate teachers who are, okay, well, I'm just at 19. I'm not going to get paid anymore. I'm just going to kind of check out until you're 30. That's a long time to just coast.
Yeah.
And I've seen it, unfortunately. But most teachers are still plugging in, and I think they deserve that raise, the ones that are in the grind. And yes, there are going to be some level 1, level 2 teachers who get this raise. But if you look at the breakdown on team, we have a whole lot more 3s who are good teachers. Maybe they don't feel valued. Maybe they'd be a 4 if they got paid better. And there's something to being valued. And some level 4s who might strive to be a 5. And we have some level 5s that we owe them. We owe all of them because they've stayed with it. But I agree with you that the 10 to 15, Kimberly, that 10 to 15, why not?
And in the right, and our structure, sorry, but our structure is, they get paid for 37 and a half hours. That's how ours is broken down in our county, but they work 45 to 50 hours a week. So actually, it's just we're paying them for the amount of time they're spending. And then there are some who cut out. I only get paid for 7.5 hours. That's all I'm doing. But this would be an incentive, to work the more hours that we know is required to be, to be effective. So thank you. And I'm sorry. I just,
Let me double check that I captured that the way you intended. Is that wording the way you're intending that? So Lance, I think I heard that right. Differentiating to provide 10,000 for current teachers and maybe the 5. Is that what I heard, or am
Well,
I?
whatever way we propose it, I mean, I don't want somebody to read this and think that I'm going along with Corey as far as the increases first and foremost, and the more substantial ones need to be for our current teachers. 3s, the 4s, the 5s, and even the 2s that they're good people. They're just not great teachers. They got tenure somehow, but they're still in the grind. There's people quitting all over the place. But we've got to retain our 4s and 5s, and they don't feel valued, et cetera, et cetera. I think, like what Corey said, that's our first focus. And with being our first focus has to be the focal point of the higher pay. You're coming out of college, I have recruits every year. I've been blessed. I do understand some friends have struggled with certain classes, but for the majority, elementary in Sumner County, we do okay with the number of applicants, and pretty good with the number of quality ones, and especially high quality ones. But they're coming in at whatever, 33, 34, 39 would be great, but they haven't been in the grind yet. But I'm with Corey. The people who have been here and paid their dues literally they're paying out of pocket. And like, Kimberly said, my level 3s are still plugging into all these school events. They may just be good teachers. They're not your excellent, they're not your elite, but they're still good people and they work hard for our kids. They just may not be skilled. Then you got the level 5s who are rocking it, and usually on all of your leadership stuff, they're always supporting and it's just, I don't like pay for scores, but like they're
Yeah.
level 5s. My gosh, we all know they deserve more.
So I wonder, so you're kind of, what I hear you say is it maybe connects over, some of this could maybe be copied down into this outcome section.
Yes.
Just thinking about from where we were in our thinking earlier to then now, how does that feel? Could that connect with some of the outcomes in your thinking?
I do think so, because I'm with Lance. I think everybody deserves it, and I'm not big on performance pay on scores. However, the conversation that's had in my office from time to time is I'm putting in 60 hours a week, making the same money as the guy that walks out the door at 3:10 every day.
Mm-hmm.
You have that in every building, and that may go back to that guy that walks out the door at 3:10 every day is in year 22 and hadn't seen a raise in forever. And there's a lot of different underlying circumstances that may or may not cause that, but I do think that some type of incentive probably needs to be spoken to with the outcomes. Add that other layer for those level 5 rock stars that are putting in the 60 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and just the leadership that they provide, even if it's not performance based, but those are the ones who are the leaders of your school.
Mm-hmm.
There is a monetary compensation that is, allotted to them. Because I know in our district, a lot of our leaders do it for free,
Yeah.
because our district doesn't have the money to pay them $1,000 for being the grade level lead or a learning leader or whatever. And so they do.
Administrators might try to find creative ways to
Sure.
offset that with less ball game duty or less bus duty, but at the end of the day, that doesn't equate to the work
No.
that they're doing on behalf of teaching and learning in your building.
Well, and just the regular workforce, you get paid for the hours spent,
True.
in money,
True.
So, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So I just kind of copied it in that section too, and we can continue to iterate on that, but get it to what maybe you feel like would be right. But I like maybe having a tie-in connection based on what I hear you saying. I think that might be an outcomes measure that you could flesh out.
Yeah, because I think everybody deserves more, and then a cherry on top would be even more for those in leadership roles and level 5s. I agree.
Nice.
Any other items from the base that we want to spend any time focusing on, or are we good with the order? I kind of noticed that looks a lot like what we recommended, which kind of made me happy.
I'll bring that back over for you in case you see if I can get these. I know it's small. You may have it pulled up on your side too. You can get them side by side.
Nurses and then counselors, RTI. As our top 4, and those are top 4 there, and technology is spoken to there, and we discussed technology, $100 per kid per year. Coordinated school health is one that we didn't, but I'm sure there are other subcommittees that spent some time living in that land, and that's important because that goes back with the nurses also. Any other items in the base that we want to discuss?
No, I think it grabbed everything that we had talked about. So, and the feedback that we had gotten here, that I had gotten, is that part's pretty on point.
Yeah, I was pleased with that, and I think everyone that looked at it on our end was pleased with those items. So let's move into weighted then, if there's not any more feedback on base. In the subcommittee meeting, they spent some time discussing poverty and sparsity, and what those items look like. do we want to speak to direct cert versus filling out paperwork when we think about poverty and dollars that are placed along with those who qualify? I know in the district that I was in when direct cert happened, that probably took about 20% of my kids away. So is that something that we would want to get some things down on record, or are we good with continuing with CEP?
As much as I would like to have the conversation about it, I still think there has to be some sort of formal accountability for that. So I feel like if we stray too far, that I don't know how to prove. So I would like it to be easier, but I think for now that's about the only measure that we have that would work. I don't know. I mean, anybody else have an opinion on that?
I'm pulling this document over just because it had these, each of the policy and definitions for us to kind of consider, so I can take some notes here. But just your,
my concern is with that segment of the population that the steering committee discussed, you know, the working poor. There are kids that would qualify for reduced that probably need more services from the school that we don't get additional money for because they don't fall within that direct cert. And again, it is a lot of running it down, and you know, a lot of that does come back to making sure that folks turn in the paperwork even before you vet the paperwork. So I know there's a lot of different ways to look at that. What are thoughts? Not everybody at once.
Well, unfortunately, I just don't feel like I have the knowledge to speak on it. But I'm writing a note to make sure I do.
Well, and to kind of go back and reference, you can check out the chairs video. I will go put that in an email for you, but it's on our main website. And the commissioner spent a little bit of time kind of talking through that as well. And then also on the steering committee, they had a robust conversation about that. And to Stephanie's point, we really need to be cognizant of how to track that. So I think each of these, we could find that accounting way to tie funding to students who are categorized. So I think what I'm understanding is the legislation to move to direct certification was to help impart some of that paperwork burden and really support those students or those families who would be eligible here. Then they too would meet the criteria for Title I. The conversation, the way Farrah was mentioning it as well, came up with that reduced category. That would be a tag, you know, that would also then serve as that how to categorize for funding. So I think it's just you can pin that for conversation about what would feel to ensure that students, you're getting a cost tied to service for high needs.
And that looks different, you know, the historical precedence there is high school kids don't fill out the paperwork. So direct cert probably helps high schools. It probably hurts elementary more. So it probably depends on where you are on how that affects you. You know, district wide, it may be a wash between filling out the paperwork and not getting it from apathetic high schoolers versus, you know, and that would be an interest. I know what it looked like in my specific building, but overall in the county, that may have been a wash. So that'd be a good thing to look up and find out too.
And that's what I want to know, because I think from my understanding, it actually direct cert helps our county. Like, so that's why I'd like to get some more information on how it affects us before I give any feedback on that.
For me, at the time that it switched, it was about a 14% difference. We dropped
Wow.
14%
Wow.
from losing those reduced lunch folks off of the.
So that's a, yeah. That's a negative impact for sure.
But high school probably gained that much. So countywide, you know, it may really be a wash.
Okay.
All right. Any other feedback on the weighted category from the draft? If you watched the steering committee, there was a lengthy discussion about dyslexia and dollars there. I think that is probably big for some counties and school districts as far as, you know, we've been doing the right thing for kids, and those students who fall into those categories, we get no dollars for the services that we're providing for those students. So being able to have some additional dollars that would go toward those students who qualify under the dyslexia law could be big in helping us finance what we're already doing at school level. So I was kind of glad to see that in there because, you know, under special ed, you get some funding, but a lot of those kids that don't qualify for special ed, we're still covering them with services at our own expense. And then the last one there was charter schools, and we've not really discussed that, but that was a lightweight comparability. So any other discussion about those things? Let's move for sake of time to direct funding items quickly.
Okay.
So high dosage tutoring is there, CTE is there, fast growing communities. Any other items that seeing the draft model has spurred your thinking that we would want to add to our recommendations?
I'm just curious as to how this tutoring is going to be. What's the plan from the state angle, from that vantage point, in seeing how that tutoring program is implemented? I mean, if you're going by below on third grade TCAP, is that a level 1, or are they going to count level 2? Because level 2 is below grade level. I mean, it's progressing, but it's not grade level. And like at my school, that would be 43% of our third graders. In some states and some districts, I mean, in some schools in our district, that would be 83% of their kids. I mean, I'm blessed to have the school I have, and I was blessed at my other school. We just had a different battle. But when is this tutoring going to take? I have 6 spots for after school tutoring through ESSER funds, and I've got 1 tutor. Teachers they don't want it. They don't want to pay for the extra work because they're already doing extra work, as we've all discussed. They're there till 5. Now they're going to be there till 6:30, and who's going to tutor these kids and when?
Under the AllCore model, doesn't that pay for additional aides for those tutoring spots during the school day, is my understanding.
It can. Yeah. So
I think that's what our county's doing next school year. So it might look like 2 additional aide positions within your building to provide that tutoring during the school day. But, you know, with the AllCore money, that's a 2-year thing. So that's going to go away after 2 years. So that would be, you know, an opportunity to continue to fund that type of structure. I see that being needed. So
I'm good with 2 years. If we show the data that it proves that it's worked, then maybe state funding will come.
True.
Replace that. You know,
might be an easy argument to have if they see the data.
If I can get kids helped out for 2 years, then I mean, we're not promised tomorrow. I mean, I'll take 1 year at a time. Just as long as I know as long as I know I'm not going to have it. If I have it next year, I can work it. And for 2 years especially, and then we'll see what happens after that. But I'm about the here and now. I need help right now. I'd take it right now if they would go ahead and give me the help. Got
Yeah,
too many kids that are falling between cracks that aren't qualifying for this or that, but struggle, and all they need is a little during the day tutoring.
Yeah.
After school tutoring is, it was well planned, but we're based on human reactions, and teachers don't want to do it, and then parents not getting their kids can't stay because of this, that, the other, and it really is a mess right now.
When we look at our kids of greatest need in that category, they don't have transportation for
Right.
after school. So you got to get them while you have them. So the thoughts of having those extra bodies during the day to grab those kids and do that tutoring is exciting and necessary.
Right.
So I pulled over the recommendation. I'm trying to toggle that as well. This question was specific to that. So I love that you're pulling that forward, Lance, that it's still a space for us to find out what's working through our AllCore approach and bright spots and sharing that out. And I know we have different models at play, so we'll be able to get a lot of feedback on what's going well and be able to share that out. But this question was around, so tutoring. This is required for students who score below and in that approaching category, as you described, on third grade TCAP, and it's beginning 23-24 school year. So the question was, should there be funding included in the formula for this legally to support this requirement? So it is a legislative requirement at this time. And so, yeah, I'll pitch that back to you. Is there any input or feedback here you would want to add, or?
This is required, which I'm fine with, and it needs to be funded. We're already, my assistants don't make copies and laminate, copy and paste. They are actually in help with RTI mostly because my special ed parapros can't help during tier 1. They can't do inclusion during RTI. They can only do inclusion during tier 1. So I use gen ed people to help during RTI inclusion. But if we're going to have to do even more, who's going to tutor these people? I mean, these children, we're already stretched. So in order to have these extra people, it needs to be funded. And I don't think that should be local if it's a state policy. I agree with it, as long as it comes with the funding.
I agree. Well, and if your school's like ours, we're working with a special ed population that's exponentially higher than what we're funded for because of the lapse in where the federal dollars for special ed come, off of a year a long time ago, and my SPED numbers are twice what that was now. So you've got SPED intervention classrooms with 12 kids in it, and that's not what that's supposed to look like. So every aide you have is somewhere with a kid, and yeah, copies aren't what they're doing.
Right.
Gotcha. So just capture it needs to be funded. And if there's anything else you want me to add to that to specify, I'll add it.
Yeah, that goes back and speaks to our recommendation about tutoring. So that kind of ties back to that also. So.
There were a few questions also as you move into the outcomes when you're ready to. So I'll pull that back over when you're ready.
Any other direct funding thoughts, ideas? Okay, we'll move on to the outcomes section. And I think those are the things that we talked about with some others that I'm sure came from other committees. We've got ACT, which we discussed, and then industry certifications, CTE, apprenticeships, FAFSA completion is there also. And I'm sad that we didn't think of that, but I'm glad that somebody did, because that's a big deal. We try to do that locally. with kids and come up with rewards for FAFSA completion. So that is a good one to throw in there.
I've done that every year for the last 5 years for my own children, and I absolutely hate it. And,
It is
and
terrible.
I have to think about what I'm doing. I think I'm pretty decently intelligent. So, and it's just a pain. And if you didn't know how to do it and navigate through it, which, if it's not signed here, they send it back. If it's not dated correctly, I mean, it's just all of that you don't even know. And that's not even stuff of logging it in and making sure you have all this. It's really, when it comes down to it, I feel like I'm pretty stupid when I can't even figure it out. But it's frustrating, and people go blindly into that, not know. I think that I like that that's included. I've never even thought about that being an opportunity, but I would have taken up on it, especially after my first try with Landon and having it sent back 6 times. I'm like, just don't go to college. Which I didn't mean, but at that moment, I did say that.
And you live in this land, so for parents that don't live in this land, it's even more difficult.
It's nonsense. And I'm educated, and I like statistics. I like paperwork. I like this stuff we're doing. I mean, I'm nerd but this stuff is just like, Morgan's got to get it done for next fall. And I'm like, gosh, I dread it. And I can't imagine if you don't, it's really should be pretty rote by now, but it's not for me. Because I hate it so much.
We have FAFSA completion nights here in Hamilton County. Most all the schools do, where parents can come with their children and sit down and get help on completing it.
Oh, this is Senator Crow. I'll never forget when, it was Representative, what was his name from Sullivan County? I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, he filled his out and he did it as best he could, and he was audited. Evidently, they audited some of those things. They picked the time to audit, and he got into a mess. I mean, he had to get accountants and attorneys, and it was crazy. So I guess they take your tax information, all that stuff that they have on there, and if you don't do it properly, you can get in trouble with an audit. I tried for several years to pare that down to one page, because really if you don't want the dollars that for financial aid, and it's just the lottery money, then you really shouldn't have to fill all that out. But it is a mess. It's a mess. I know Senator Alexander up in D.C. tried to remember to fix that, and I don't know if he ever got anywhere or not. But anyway, it's a dangerous thing when you get audited for that. That's for sure.
The word audit's just bad.
Yeah.
Any other items in the outcomes area from the proposal that we want to go back and look at, discuss, add to?
Nope.
Anything on those additional considerations? Some of those were interesting. I can't imagine being a pre-K through 3rd grade band teacher.
Yeah.
All right, so Janice, do we want to go on back over to our recommendations page, make sure we have the things that we want down, and see if that looks okay, or do we need to go back to those policy pages first?
I think we could probably do both. So got to scan here. I think the only other comment, would you want me to note that about FAFSA, that it's very cumbersome? I mean, I could just add, that's kind of the takeaway.
Lance doesn't like it.
Well, I think he's, yeah.
He's among friends.
He's got a lot
Let's
of
not say
friends.
that because I might get audited. I mean,
Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that.
until I get my $10,000 raise, IRS shouldn't have to worry about my salary. But
No.
once I get that raise, then they can. I don't even know what I put down. I've just we don't even use the aid. So I mean, I look at it's sent it back enough that they're probably not worried about me.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha.
Until I get that raise.
Yeah. I'll make
Yeah,
that match.
10,000. So I'm good with $10,000 raise.
There you go. Yeah, so I think that's an overview. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of tag into on the recommendations? And we can pull over when you're ready. We can pull over the document 5 that has the policy, because I just edited off of 4 on that one. So we can pull over document 5. Sorry about all the overlay there. So this is the document with some the questions that came out of steering committee and then just overall committee feedback that you could weigh in on or just connect to as.
So we talked about economically disadvantaged, the direct cert versus going back to doing paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of like Kimberly. It would be interesting to see what the difference numerically was from the old way to the new way.
Yeah. So like the district impact or the change.
Do we remember what year that was?
No, but I can find that.
And then the second one was the definition of concentration of poverty. While she's typing, we'll bump on down there. Attending a Title I school, should the state dollars fall directly along the lines with Title I schools? I'm going to speak personally there. My school is fed by 6 schools that are Title I schools, but I'm not a Title I school. So for personal reasons, I would like for them to look at if I qualified when they're giving me funds versus if we're jumping through those hoops. And the history of that in my district is at some point, the middle school administration didn't want to do the federal paperwork. So the pieces of the pie got larger for those elementary schools, and they don't want to share the pie with me, even though I would be willing to do that paperwork. So it's been a district decision to not allow my school to be a Title I school. But I obviously qualify because all of my feeders qualify. So all those kids that are in my school were in those schools. So just kind of, I would like for that to not just be tied to being title, but qualifying.
I was going to say, can we put something in there as far as to be able to qualify either way? Because there are more than one path to get there. It just kind of opens it up for kind of like the direct cert. At least there's an accountability piece there.
Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So connecting to the qualifying free and reduced criteria for those that are not Title I schools. So I can clean that up a little too, but this is the gist.
As much as I'd love to have those Title I dollars, when I'm not having to jump through those hoops that my fellow principals are jumping through, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Sparsity, how population sparsity is figured, and Janice gave me a little lesson on that before some of you hopped on today. There are actually definitions for that, and I had not thought about the fact that there are places that don't qualify as rural, but would qualify as sparse. And when you're looking at transportation, you know, kids in large counties are spending a lot of time on a bus. So that's a lot of miles for a bus to collect just few students per mile. So I can see where there would be a monetary need for that within the new structure, so that those students are getting bused to school on the state dollar.
Janice, what are some examples of that? I mean, my mind can't go there. I can't.
Yeah. So, and I put in the chat to see if that helps. So it's how the population is dispersed across the area. It creates more transportation challenges and costs. So a couple of good examples. One might be Campbell County. It's very large and geographically, but because of its close proximity to Knoxville, it's not necessarily rural, but then the sparsity is also just to get to students, it has that impact fiscally for students in those areas. So it can be rural. I mean, Hickman County, if you're familiar with that area, that's one of the top, geographic size. It's large, and it may also be considered rural. But just spending that increased cost in transportation is what it's really getting to. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
So on the note here, so what's a current thinking about students per square mile? So thinking about an amount or being able to pay a weighted value for that transportation, those additional transportation costs for districts that would be in those sparse areas. So not necessarily, so differentiating between the rurality and the sparsity to help ensure that there's a weighted value for both. Okay.
Anything else on the policy items that are on the screen now that we want to add feedback?
You kind of mentioned this one. Does this tag into what you were mentioning earlier? So I think I could pull over your note and also list that here. So just just maybe copying that whole thing. Does that feel like it fits well enough for a policy consideration here? So for salaries, maybe even just say that. And you noted 10 to 15 in the range, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe then also.
It's not showing up on the screen. Should we be seeing it in red?
Oh, yes. What are you? Can you see it, Kimberly? I saw a thumbs up from you. Are you able to see?
I can see what you just typed. The base salary increases 10 to 15,000.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to see it, Farrah?
Oh, see it. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. Okay. Good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah. I just pulled it from the recommendations document that we were editing off of. There we go. Teacher salaries question. Are there any other policies for teacher salaries that should be included?
Do we want to add anything there about performance or not?
I'm not sure we should, because then we'd have to have another committee to. I mean, we tried this in Sumner County 5 or 6 years ago. Me and Kenny Powell and some others. We exhausted ourselves, and then we went back to
Yeah.
You know, even us knowing who our better teachers are, and it still was how much litigation you're going to have and how much, you know, given who's going to have the better rosters and who's, you know, you're going to have teachers wanting the 5 for growth, so they may not take your highest classes, they may take your lowest classes, which is apparently was a strategy of some of our best teachers saying, well, I want the 5, so I'll take standard classes, and your best people, they deserve them standard classes, and then honors classes, and your AP kids deserve these particular teachers I have in mind. And it's just, we exhausted ourselves for months and then came back to a better step salary for teachers. But again, we top out and it wasn't the greatest, but I think we'd have to form a new committee to go over all that, what would constitute it. And then I'm just not sure it would pass. It sounds great to even legislators, parents, even teachers, but
That's definitely a double-edged sword for sure.
yeah. And I've seen some great teachers demoralized with a value added 1.
Yep.
And I can't even explain how their kids, even a cohort, grew percentage wise, but it was a deemed a 1. And in some years, negative growth, for lack of better words, is a 4.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like,
I agree.
it's hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think with this raise, like I said, your 1s and 2s and the people who are vegging and camping out, yeah, they're going to get a raise, but I'm not going to focus on them. I'm focused on the 3s who are good people and just average to good teachers, but also my excellent 4s and my elite 5s. They really deserve, and some people are going to get a piece of the pie and didn't really have anything to do with baking it, but you know, that's the way it's going to be. But we have a lot of great teachers that deserve this, and maybe it motivates some of the people who are just demoralized. I don't know. Maybe they're not trying because of feeling unvalued.
Well, we currently have a differentiated pay plan, and that's we have that in our state, so we can just leave that.
You folks want to weigh in there on the K2 portion?
Mhm.
That's not the world I live in, but some of you guys do. So if you have any questions or answers about K2.
Well, sorry.
Go ahead, Kimberly.
I've lived in the K2 world for all of my career. I absolutely appreciate and love the additional considerations with the pre-K 3 band. I know now this is very old data, but when I worked in Georgia many moons ago, they did have K2, a paraprofessional with every single K2 teacher all day, every day. There was no sharing. So whether it's that or whether it's smaller class sizes, like that 100% needs to happen, in my opinion. Teaching 22 and 23 first graders is just, it's not recommended at all. And that's what we're seeing across the state in some areas. So
Smaller class sizes and better pay.
yes,
I think that's the
yes.
investment, is to pay these K-2 teachers better, along with everyone else, and then in addition, lowering their class size. Because if you put a parapro with them, if that was funded, you may get, well, now that we have 2 adults, we can have 30 kids in the class. I mean, I just never know what's going to happen.
Well, and I will say, I'm not certain that 2 teachers per 30 is a way to go. I mean, like, I'd rather have 1 to 15 in a classroom than 2 to 30.
I'd rather pay my people better.
Yes.
With their 20 to 25, and I know high school 35, but pay them better first and foremost. And then if we can lower the class sizes, even better, because that's what they're wanting. That's what they deserve.
And my sound kind of wavered a moment, so double check me. I thought additional personnel, and your example was EAs. And then
Could
also,
be. And then the smaller student to teacher ratio in K2 for
Okay.
sure.
And you had originally said 1 to 15 there when we talked that second.
Yes,
So you might want to
Yeah.
throw that on there, Janice.
yes.
There we go.
All right, any middle school items? Corey?
Yeah, I'm here. It's a lot. There's nothing else after reviewing that. I mean, I haven't seen anything on there that I feel like we need to add. I mean, I've got thoughts on all of it, but I'm not sure that the thoughts I have are really going to be relevant to the discussion as this is turned in, as far as the outcomes.
I'm kind of with you. You know, that career coach was on those additional items for 7th through 9th
Seven.
grade. I think that would be a neat ask, but I don't know that the impact of that is gonna be the dividends that we would want from what that would cost. So I don't know. Any other items for elementary? And then the dreaded accountability.
Mm.
What accountability measures should be included in the new formula? All students, subgroups, ready graduate. And I'm kind of going to take Corey's line. I have opinions on that I'll just hang on to.
And think kind of back.
If we're going to fund these and have more EAs and lower class sizes and better paid teachers, I understand that. Okay, so what results are we going to see? Surely we would have higher achievement, higher growth with teachers valued, teachers who are better paid, more EAs, smaller class sizes. That's including, because we went with 25 even for high school rather than the huge numbers they have now. I would hope that achievement and growth would be the success rate. I mean, it is now, and we're not funded. I'm okay, bring it on. Like you said, for 2 years with the tutoring, okay, give me 2 years. Surely we can show with extra help that our kids grow in ELA and or math or both in achievement and growth. So I have no problem with accountability. I hate the word, but we already have it, and we're not funded the way we should be.
And Farrah, connecting back over to something you mentioned here around middle school, might be interesting to think about some of the direct funding things for CTE, or if it's connecting over to those college and career coaching that reaches into the middle grades, we might actually then see that bear out as an increase for students and more completers, because if they're making some of those connections in the middle grades, then that might actually bear out as an outcome for us to have more students who are reaching that credential, or finding what they are wanting to explore more fully and connecting to programs. So neat to think about that progression if this is in place. So we can certainly pin to think about, even beyond accountability, what might feel like something to incentivize. But then I get that, thinking about both sides of the sword there. Reporting, anything, thinking from your perspective on reporting, any of these, knowing what reporting currently looks like for your ADM, your daily attendance.
Back to that steering committee, they spent quite a bit of time discussing whether we should continue to go off of last year's ADM versus real-time funding, following the kid monthly or whatever. And true, we have that data by the day because it's in EIS, but there's some thought that that could be a financial burden left to schools if you had an influx or a large exit of kids within a small amount of time because of a disaster or whatever it might be, that then you're left to try to figure out how to pick up the pieces and fund where you've lost funding. I can see both sides of that also. And I told Janice, I've been there. I've been up 75. I've been down 75. If that fluctuated real time, what would that do to schools and districts?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
I think the process of keeping up with that in real time, coming from a high poverty school, turnover was just, I mean, we had kids walk in to take TCAP and had not been in our school yet. I had kids that came my last year at my previous school. We had kids that came for the last week. And I thought, well, you know, as a principal, I didn't say out loud, but why did you come? You came enrolled in a new school, and one was a 5th grader. I'm like, they didn't want to get turned in for truancy. I thought, didn't say it out loud. Nobody would have known.
Yeah.
Like, your previous school district was already closed. And anyway, but my previous school, it was like Farrah said, I'd lose 75 this year, but I'd gain 75. And a lot of my kids didn't necessarily come from Tennessee. So where's the money following them from?
Right.
No other county. And like, it's all, especially the border counties. And we are, because Portland gets Kentucky and vice versa. And then it's just crossing over, I'm sure, Macon County and Robertson. And I just think that's who's going to manage all of that coming and going and financing these, and then the district has to drop back and punt literally on real time every time somebody moves. Did they move to another school in your district? Did they move to another district? Did they it's too much. I mean, it sounds good philosophically, but I think managing it would be a disaster.
I agree. Any other thoughts on maintenance of effort or PD? As we are over our time, but if you guys are willing to stay on or have other thoughts that you want to discuss, let's go ahead and get those down. I know maintenance of effort kind of doesn't fall within our realm of our jobs on a daily basis, but I know that's a real concern for our counties and what that's going to look like on the local end.
Mm-hmm.
As far as professional development goes, and once again, I can only speak to elementary, the state, in my opinion, has done such a terrific job providing the professional development for ELA for our teachers. I would love to see something in math as well. But that's for elementary only. I know that there are other needs probably for middle and high school to get the ELA support. But they've gone above and beyond with this early literacy and everything. So that's all I have.
I agree with that. I feel like sometimes we're sliding others. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Great information. Good thoughts. We meet again next week.
We do. A week from today. This group is normally a Tuesday, so it'll be the 25th. I will pull that back up. You all have toggled nicely through all the things. 25th, same time, same place, and that will be in as each group is providing feedback on policies, as you just did. We'll have that gathered for us to reflect upon as well and continue to iterate. Also, any other definitions and things that committees have asked for clarification, those experts were pulling that in and then providing it to you in writing. So you should see those. That's the materials that are in your folder. So
keep watching the folder if you haven't had an opportunity to go through some of that before now. And if we were to get more snow days in the coming days, maybe you can have a chance to dig through those. Appreciate everybody's comments. And we will meet again next week. And then we're getting close to the end of the month for the state of the state. And then hopefully that'll get some real numbers going with our work. So appreciate all of you. Janice, thank you, Janice, for toggling us around on your screen and all your tabs.
Of course. Thank you all. Great conversations, and appreciate you all. Thank you. Have a great day.
Hey, Janice.
Mhm.
Can we make sure I got everybody, because I couldn't see everybody on my screen.
Yeah.
So I had Corey and Kim and Lance and Stephanie and Senator Crow and Lee popped on. And
Mhm.
that's not. Is that right?
That's right.
8 total.